Hello everyone and welcome to our information session on substance use for young people, helping caregivers being aware of trends in substance use. My name is Nora Flanagan and I'm the Child and Family Support Coordinator with TUSLA Dublin North. A big part of my role is working very closely with statutory and voluntary services within the Dublin North area. From this link in with services, it has become apparent that there are various concerns regarding young people and substance misuse, and so this has led to a joined-up approach with services to address these concerns. The services involved in today's webinar is the North Dublin Regional Drug Task Force with David Creed presenting, and the Health Promotion Officer of the HSE, Gail McNicholas. Other services have been involved in putting this presentation together that included Foróga, Crosscare and Tobacco Free Ireland, with the Children and Young Persons Services Committee funding this rollout. We did a rollout last year on this topic, but as you all know, things change quickly and further concerns for young people regarding substances emerge. So we have updated our talk in this regard. We hope you get plenty of information from today's presentation, and if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll come back to them at the end. Just to note, this event is being recorded, so if anyone wishes for this recording, we can pass it out also. So the aim of our talk today is to enhance awareness and understanding of the effects of substance use, to provide information of current substance use trends among young people in the area, and to signpost resources and supports available. So I'll pass you on to David Creed now, who will further continue.
Thank you, Nora. Just to give a definition of what we're talking about when we're talking about substance use, we're referring to mood-altering chemicals or psychoactive substances. So depending on what documents you might read or research you read, you often find the use of the term MACs, so mood-altering chemicals. What it means is that these substances, they affect the brain and how the brain functions. There are three broad categories of effect. There are 6 broad categories of substances and 3 broad categories of effect. So the first one of those are things that stimulate, so they're uppers. So that's everything from your tea and coffee and all the ways out to crack cocaine and things like that. So they're stimulants. The other one then are the opposite of that. They're things that bring people's mood down. So they're sedatives or depressants. So that's everything from your over-the-counter painkillers can be sedatives, prescription medication, alcohol, and all the ways that then down to opiates. So your heroin and those sort of substances. And then the third one are things that take you out of it. So they cause a trip or they cause hallucinations. What typically will be in there will be things like LSD or magic mushrooms and these type of products. And obviously you can have some then that do 2 of those. And obviously you can't go up and down at the same time. But some kind of take you up and out. So the likes of ecstasy would do that. And some take you down and out. So things like ketamine, or that they will be a typical substance that would do that. So something that is a sedative, but also gives hallucinogenic has hallucinogenic properties. So they're the 3 main effects of these substances. And that's useful to note at the beginning, because if we come across somebody or if someone belonging to you arrives home and they are showing signs of wear, you have an idea what it is by how they are, how their mood is. So is it elevated or is it depressed? That'll give you an idea of what might have been taken. Okay. We're going to do a little piece on e-cigarette. Everybody knows what these are now. We're very familiar with the colours, the flavours, the shapes, the everything that's done to package it and to kind of make it attractive to young people in particular. We know what they are. So we're kind of skipping that in the assumption that we're familiar with it. But we will show a little piece in relation to it. There are 2 videos in this, and I think the easiest thing to do is play the first video because this is one produced by the World Health Organization, and it just kind of gives a definition. So we're clear what we're talking about.
E-cigarettes. What are they and why are we talking about them? E-cigarettes are battery-powered devices which heat a liquid to create emissions, which are inhaled by the user. Some e-cigarettes contain nicotine while others do not. Some that claim not to contain nicotine sometimes do. They typically contain toxic substances, some of which are known to cause cancer, and heavy metals, including lead. Data from some countries show alarming increases in e-cigarette use among youth. While some claim that they might play a role in helping people stopping smoking, the reality is that they are more popular among children than among adults in some countries. This is of great concern, as we know that e-cigarettes are harmful to health, especially for children and adolescents. Inhaling nicotine, a highly addictive substance, can have long-lasting and damaging effects on the developing brain. Use of e-cigarettes increases people's risk of getting heart and lung diseases. When pregnant women use them, their unborn baby can be harmed. E-cigarettes are often used along with one or more tobacco products. Using 2 or more products means people's risk of breathing in harmful substances is increased. E-cigarettes undoubtedly are bad for your health. If they are not banned in your country, they should be strictly regulated and, most importantly, must be kept away from children. WHO recommends: don't smoke, don't vape. 2. Protect children from the harmful effects of nicotine. 3. Do not use e-cigarettes in public places where smoking is prohibited. 4. Don't let yourself be manipulated by e-cigarette advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. E-cigarettes are harmful, and it is best not to use them. If you want to quit smoking, ask your doctor for advice and use proven and effective ways, such as nicotine replacement and other non-nicotine therapies. It's your life. Don't lose control to nicotine.
Okay, so some concerns arising out of that. One is that the use of vapes, especially nicotine vapes, they can be gateways to other substances. There's also the risk, as noted, in that the risk of poisonings, burns, blast injuries, because that is a battery-powered device, lung injury, and addiction. And the addiction, obviously, nicotine was mentioned there, but other substances now are finding their way into vapes that we need to be concerned about. Some of the chemicals can cause tissue damage, as you can see there, and some are cancer-causing or have longer-term effects on them. Because we are still in the early days of vapes and the evolution of what is being produced to be consumed through vapes, we don't have considerable longitudinal studies in relation to this. So we are working on early concerns and early research that is done in relation to vapes and their content. The other, it was mentioned in the video as well, is there are addictive chemicals in those, and I just want to kind of highlight other things that are in vapes now that are kind of raise the concern in relation to it. And I'm going to kind of go sideways into this and just mention in relation to cannabis. Now, cannabis is a naturally occurring plant. It has several compounds that are known as cannabinoids. There's over 100 compounds that can be drawn from the cannabis plant, some for medicinal purposes, some not. The two that you'll be most familiar with are CBD and THC. Now, the CBD is not psychoactive, it's not addictive, and it has medical uses. The THC, which is the tetrahydrocannabinol, it is psychoactive and it is addictive. We know that, and there are plenty of trials and there's plenty of evidence in relation to that. The reason I'm mentioning those is that what's happening now in vapes is that we have a number of synthetic mood-altering chemicals being introduced into vaping. The risk of them is because they're synthetic means that the potency can be much higher. So what's different as well is if we talk about a synthetic created, it means that it is a combination of chemicals that are brought together to create the same effect as something that happens naturally in the cannabis plant. Okay, so it's mimicking the THC. It is not drawn from the plant. So I put two other pieces below that, the THC and the HHC. The difference really is, as you can see there, is the beginning of one has the THC as tetra and the other has hexa as the beginning of it. And all that tetra means is that there are 4 parts. and hexa means there are 6 parts. So effectively what we're saying is that the makeup of it is one has 4 chemical compounds, the other has 6. And what the producers of HHC have done is they've taken part of the natural plant, the CBD extract, and they have added to the molecular structure. So they've added 1 or 2 compounds to that changes the molecular structure. And by doing so, it creates a new psychoactive substance, which is the HHC. Vendors selling HHC vapes, they will tell you that it's legal. But by saying it's legal, what they're saying is that it's not illegal. It's not saying that it's regulated or that there's any oversight in relation to the production of HHC, because there's not. And that's where the risk is in relation to the use of HHC vapes. They can be bought online and they can be bought over the counter in a number of the vaping shops around the country. The risk associated with this is that because it's not regulated, the potency of this is up to 95% HHC. So you can imagine the concentration of HHC in those vapes. We do know it's hallucinogenic. We do know that it's causing psychosis in a number of users. And I suppose that's why I've kind of put it in the in this talk today, is that because it's so readily available and because of the potency and the risk associated with it. Earlier in the year, one of the psychologists in St. James's Hospital, he was on a primetime program in relation to vaping, and this in particular. And he noted at the time that there were 2 or 3 new presentations to St. James's every week. People with enduring psychosis is the way he described it. So what that means is that a person up to then perfectly healthy, physical and mental health, perfectly normal, perfectly healthy, and even with small or moderate amount of HHC vape, they presented with psychotic episodes. When he talked about enduring psychosis, he means that this is something that will affect the person and will continue to affect the person for a prolonged period. So that could be months, it could be years. So that's somebody suffering from psychosis and being treated with some as somebody would be with presenting with psychosis. So serious risk to a person's mental health. So I just want to highlight that, and our best advice really is to avoid using them. They're too dangerous. It's not regulated. I'll talk about regulation in a minute. The last Minister for Health, he did make an attempt to ban the sale of vapes to under 18s, and it didn't get over the line before the government closed down for business, and we went into election mode recently. So we don't know what's going to happen in relation to that in the new year. Okay, so just that's in relation to that. The legislation is there and came into place last year. It's not fully enacted, so we can still see that vapes are readily available. It's going down the line of tobacco, that so it's to be restricted from a point of view of access. So the self-service of type shops, that should be stopped at this stage. They're supposed to be behind the counter in closed cabinets where the person has to ask for, and they should have to present proof of age before they will be sold any vaping product. We are still waiting for it to be fully enacted in all areas of that, in order to protect young people in particular, is what was aimed at, protecting young people and protecting people's health. Okay. The harmful effect of nicotine, again, the HSC produced a really nice video in relation to this. So we're going to watch the video. One of the things I want you to do when you're listening to this is every time that nicotine is mentioned, I want you to think of cannabis as well, because cannabis and nicotine, they affect the brain in a very similar way. So you get the idea of why it is, why these are addictive, what it means.
Sometimes people who smoke or vape will say that they are not addicted and that they could quit at any time. But then they don't, despite the fact that they know that what they are doing is harmful to their health. The addictive effects of smoking and vaping are initially hidden and lead a person to believe that they are in control, when in fact they are addicted. Tobacco companies spend billions on convincing young people that smoking and vaping is somehow okay, even glamorous. For instance, they pay celebrities and influencers to promote their products on social media and pay production companies to place their products in films and on TV, all to get young people addicted and increase their profits. Nicotine is the psychoactive drug responsible for the addictive effects of tobacco and e-cigarette products. Even smoking a small number of cigarettes or just a short time spent experimenting with e-cigarettes can cause a person to become addicted. Once in the body, nicotine is fast and sneaky. It races into the lungs when you smoke or vape. From the lungs, it enters the blood and reaches the brain within seconds of that first puff. Nicotine affects a pathway in the brain called the reward pathway. The reward pathway is the area of the brain which makes us feel good every time we eat something that tastes nice or do something that we enjoy. Once nicotine arrives at this area of the brain, it attaches itself to receptors, like a key fitting in a lock. This activates the reward pathway. When the pathway is activated, a chemical called dopamine is released. Dopamine is the feel-good hormone and creates feelings of pleasure. Repeated stimulation of the reward pathway with nicotine results in a rewiring of the reward pathway as your brain becomes convinced that it needs nicotine to release dopamine to make you feel good. Every time you smoke or vape, you get that feeling of reward, so you do it again and again. Over time, the body becomes convinced that it needs nicotine to feel good, but it can never get enough. Nicotine can trigger brain changes that make people, particularly young people, crave more nicotine. Until about age 25, the brain is still developing, and using nicotine can harm the parts of the brain that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control. Nicotine also has physical effects on the body. People who smoke or vape may experience any combination of nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, cold clammy skin, a rapid pulse, dizziness, fainting. The longer you smoke or vape, the stronger the cravings for nicotine become. When you quit smoking or vaping, the reward pathway is not stimulated by nicotine anymore, resulting in less dopamine. With less dopamine, people get withdrawal symptoms. Common symptoms of nicotine withdrawal include anger, frustration, and irritability, difficulty concentrating and studying, restlessness and anxiety, difficulty sleeping, depression, hunger or increased appetite. The good news is that these changes in the brain start returning to normal the longer you go without nicotine. Getting past the first stages of withdrawal when you quit can be hard, but over time your brain rewires itself again. It stops craving nicotine and goes back to the way it was before you smoked or vaped. It is normal for young people to want to experiment as they grow into adulthood, but nicotine addiction happens very quickly, and the risk of long-term addiction is very high. There is no upside to smoking or using e-cigarettes at all. The HSE has services that can help you to stop smoking or vaping.
Now that video is available on the HSE website, and we have QR codes at the end of this that will bring you to that if you're interested in following up from that. Now, in relation to the vapes, we're aware of what they look like. So if we're watching out for young people to see if they're vaping, we'll know what they look like if the device is there. We know about the fruity flavors that are in them, so you can smell that fruity is there. We know if they're using them over a period of time, because as it was said in that video, the loss of concentration, the withdrawal effects, you might notice any of those. So the agitation or the stress or the anxiousness. So they were all covered in that video. So the things to watch out for if we're concerned that young people might be using the vaping or overdoing the vaping of that. So I'll hand it over to Gail now, who's going to cover some areas in relation to alcohol.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I suppose from my perspective as a health promotion officer in the HSE, and speaking about alcohol, I always begin with what alcohol actually is. So the World Health Organization say that there's no safe level of alcohol for our health, and the International Agency on Cancer Research have shown that alcohol is a toxic, psychoactive and dependence-producing substance, and it's a group 1 carcinogen. So group 1 carcinogen means that it's something that causes cancer. So we're talking about the same type of risk as asbestos, radiation and tobacco. It's causally linked to 7 different types of cancer, including esophageal, liver, colorectal and breast cancers, and it's associated with 740,000 new cancer cases every year globally. Next slide there. Another key piece of information is that alcohol is a neurotoxin. This means that it damages cells and blood vessels and stops new brain cells from developing. You can see here in the image that alcohol affects the brain in all of the key functions. So we have from the cerebral cortex to mental health, the hippocampus for learning and memory, and the central nervous system, as well as many more. And these effects are damaging enough in the adult brain that's already developed, but in terms of children and young people with a brain that's not fully formed, it's particularly dangerous. So if we know that their brains are not fully developed until their mid-20s and this neurotoxin is introduced, this young, underdeveloped brain is much more susceptible to the negative effects of alcohol. Levels of addiction in those who begin drinking before 18 are much higher. So we have 9 out of 10 people with substance use problems started drinking before 18. We know that kids who start drinking before the age of 15 are 4 times more likely to develop an addiction. So it's really important for yourselves and to kind of understand that parents are the #1 influence on their children's decision to take alcohol. In terms of the evidence then that we're currently collecting, so we have the Planet Youth study of 14 to 16-year-olds across Dublin North. In 2021, 29% of children received their alcohol from a parent or other adult, and this increased to 34% in 2023. And we know that many parents feel that it's safer to provide alcohol or let their children drink at home, but the evidence shows that this is actually just increases overall consumption of alcohol. And as we've seen in the previous slides, it's really harmful in a lot of ways. So what can we do? Well, the evidence is clear that the best thing we can do as parents is defer any alcohol use by our children for as long as possible. Individual parents or groups of parents in parents associations, sporting or recreation clubs, as a collective, could agree not to give their children alcohol or other children in the home or elsewhere. And this really can make a big difference to the short and long-term health and well-being of our young people.
Thank you, Gail. We're going to move on to a couple of other substances that we want to kind of highlight. And these are substances that young people are going to encounter as they go into the early teen years. So the two we'll cover are nitrous oxide and cannabis. So I'll start with nitrous oxide. In the images there on the side, people might be familiar with that silver bullet looking thing. They're used in the catering trade and in hospitality industry, use them for cream froths and those sort of things. The other one there, you see fast gas, that is a bigger container, and that is now being sold for use as a psychoactive substance. So what is it? It's a sweet smelling colorless gas. It is categorized as a solvent. So what it does is that it introduces nitrogen into the bloodstream when it's inhaled. That's why it gives its effect. It's very quickly gets into the bloodstream. It only takes seconds for it to take effect, and it is short-lived. So it's gone out of the system in 5 to 10 minutes. What's interesting about it is that it's not addictive. It's not psychologically addictive, nor is it chemically addictive. The way users report how they feel is they feel euphoric. They can be giddy or giggly. They can feel relaxed and calm. So in what I've said, just in those couple of sentences, you might be forgiven for thinking, sure, it's harmless enough. So if it's gone out of the body in 10 minutes, if it's not addictive and it makes you feel euphoric, giddy or kind of relaxed, wouldn't it be lovely to take it after a busy day at work and to go home to chill out and relax? It's not quite that simple. The concerns in relation to it is that of its nature, it is very cold. So it sits at between -40 and -55 degrees Celsius. So it can't be used directly out of the can. or the canister, because it would just cause frost burns to the tongue, throat, and lungs, the whole lot. So the secondary device, the balloons are used. It's released into a balloon that increases the temperature, and it's then inhaled out of the balloon. It can cause dissociative effects. So in other words, it blurs sound and vision. It can feel like a person is looking at their own life from outside of their body in slow motion. That's kind of the effect it's often described as giving. Some people who use it can report having headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, loss of balance, and disorientation. And that's because when you introduce nitrous oxide into the bloodstream, it's replacing the oxygen with nitrogen. People might who have attended A&E, or if there's any mothers there that use the gas and air in the maternity hospital, you might be familiar with it. The difference there is that it's mixed with air and the nitrous oxide, so it's not pure nitrous oxide. The reason it's used there is that, as it was mentioned earlier about the neuroscience of it, that like our bodies are more Wi-Fi than they are hardwired. So the chemicals pass along the neural pathways in our body and send signals up and down. And what this does is that it blocks that transmission of signals. So that's why it's used as in pain relief, in A&E, in maternity, and some dentist surgeries will still use it. So one of the risks associated with using it is that because it causes that blockage of transmission of signals up and down the body, a person that uses a lot of it can report having feelings of tingling in their hands and feet. So the extremities feel that tingling, and that's because it's blocking the neural pathways up and down, and you can't feel your fingers and toes. It can cause long-term damage. So ongoing use of this can cause ongoing nerve damage that may or may not come back. We don't have many cases of extreme use of it in Ireland, although last year when we were presenting this, I had come across a report from Tala Hospital where they reported 2 young lads, they were in their teenagers, presented to hospital with this kind of extremities, this loss of feeling in their hands and feet, and a wooziness in their heads. And it was actually one of the nurses treating them. She twigged what possibly had been going on, and she asked them if they had been at a party where nitrous oxide was being used, and they said they were. So obviously at a party, a bit more was used than they normally would. And they were suffering some kind of peripheral nerve damage. Now, if you bring that to an extreme, we're all very aware that if we have a lack of oxygen to the brain, it can cause an acquired brain injury. So in extreme cases, nitrous oxide can cause mild or early stage, if you like, brain injury. So that is the level of risk that we're talking about. One of the things that happens in relation to this as well is that there's very often there are secondary injuries. So a person will fall, they'll fall over something, bang their head when they're using it because they can faint. It's one of the things that it causes to happen. One of the big concerns, I suppose, from a point of view of using this is that the small silver bullet you see there at the side, there's about 8 balloons worth in that. The bigger fast gas canister there, it's sold by weight rather than kind of volume. So that's just short of half a kilo. But it can fill 200 balloons. So if you can imagine a group of young people have one of those, or sharing that between them, the risk of overuse is much higher if they have a bigger canister because they can use more balloons out of it. So it is risky. In that respect, I suppose it's the immediacy of it, the injuries that can be caused if they fall or if they faint, and then the longer term injuries in relation to nerve damage if it's ongoing. Okay, we move on to the cannabis. It comes largely in 3 kind of ways that people will be most familiar with people. So obviously the weed or the herb that you see in the top picture there. The resin, which is the secondary one there, it's higher concentration, needs a bit more work in order to use it. And then the third is the availability through vaping products. So again, what is it? It comes from a natural source. It is a natural occurring plant. Back in the old days, the marijuana plant that was being grown had a potency of about 10%. Now what's available because of crossbreeding and because of the way the plants are produced, very often they're sprayed with synthetic THC that's absorbed into the plant that increases the THC, which is the psychoactive substance in the cannabis. So it's now up to about 20% proof in the weed that people are using now. The higher concentration will be in the block or in the resin. That needs to be heated, and it's usually smoked in a bong or in a pipe. The concentration is higher. It takes a bit more work to use it, if you like. The risk of the vaping products is that, again, as I mentioned earlier in relation to vaping products, the potency of THC in vaping products is between 50 and 90%. So obviously much higher effect on the user. So the effects, people feel relaxed, chilled, introspective. Some people feel happy and chatty or giddy. Some people feel tired and withdrawn. Again, the concern with this is, as I mentioned to you earlier when we were watching the video about the nicotine, we can transfer the word nicotine with cannabis in this because it works in the very same way. So it affects the release of dopamine and serotonin. It can change the neural pathways into duping the brain into thinking that it needs this to survive, and I can't feel good and I can't feel that reward unless I have cannabis, unless I have that THC, which is the psychoactive compound, unless I have that in my system. And obviously, it was mentioned in that video as well about tolerance. The more people use, the body is incredible the way it balances the chemicals and balances the flow of chemicals in our body. And it restricts the flow of chemicals. So that's what builds tolerance. So in other words, a person using cannabis, even on a regular, if it's only once a week, they build up a tolerance to it. So in order to get the same effect, they need to use more. And obviously, the more that's used, the higher the risk and the higher it gets compounded into the brain, that the brain needs this in order to feel good. It also affects withdrawal. And withdrawal is part of the addiction because people want to avoid feeling the nausea or the sickness that goes with the withdrawal symptoms. So they're all connected to each other, all those pieces of it. The effects of ongoing cannabis use is that it affects the brain and the ability to learn. So what it does is it blocks the transmission of signals or information between the short-term memory into the long-term memory. So it makes it more difficult if a person is studying either in school or in college. It makes it harder to learn what's going on. And what is already learned and is in the long-term memory cannot be recalled. So it affects that kind of memory and the recall from memory as well. Coordination, obviously, that's part of all of that, how it affects the brain. The confused, anxious, and paranoid, they are symptoms that are certainly there if a person is using it on a more regular basis. It also makes it very difficult to work with people who are using cannabis on an ongoing basis because they have that sense of paranoia. And they don't see things or hear things in the same objectivity as they might otherwise do so. The reference there to hallucinations is important because the potency of the products that are available now, the higher the potency, the higher the risk of hallucination. And we would certainly hear from people who are using vapes in particular, or who are using higher levels of cannabis. They would be reporting hallucinations. The last one we have mentioned there is in relation to edibles. So oils in use in cooking. The edibles that tend to kind of be available in Ireland in waves are the jellies. The jellies, they present another difficulty because if you eat something, there's a secondary process. So the process of digestion has to happen before the substance becomes available. The risk of that is that a person, for instance, if you have two people in a room, one smokes a joint and the other takes an edible, the person that smokes the weed has the effect of it within a couple of minutes. 20 minutes into it, the person after eating a jelly still feels no effect. So they might think, oh, that wasn't really good, or must be low for THC in that, so they'll take a second one. 40 minutes in, the first one now is starting to get into the bloodstream. An hour in, and the second one is kicking in as well. So you have the risk of overdose because the potency in the edibles is really, really high. You're talking about between 50 and 90% proof. So the edibles are a high risk. Okay, so I'll move on from that. Some of the things to look out for in the nitrous oxide, obviously the canisters and balloons. So if you see those things around, or you wonder, well, what's that about? That could be a telltale. Unexplained injuries such as bruises, bumps, dirt on clothes, anything that might be out of sync with where you think the young person was in the course of the day. This is mainly a young person's substance. This is something they experiment with. So when I say young people, it is mainly young people using it. So that might be raise some questions. The cannabis thing you're looking out for is small burns on clothes or the smell of cannabis. It burns hotter than tobacco, so that's why it causes burns at times on clothing if the ash falls on it. Obviously, the smell of it, some people say it smells like smelly socks. I think it smells like burning couches or burning furniture. So you might smell that. Or if they have the roll your own paper, for that people would use for cigarettes, and they don't smoke cigarettes. If you find that. Or you may come across a grinder. The grinders now, they're produced, they're lovely to look at. It looks like an old snuff box. Some of them are highly decorated, but that's to grind down the buds before it's smoked. So that you might find one of those. The behavior is the big thing in relation to the use of cannabis. So the mood will change. It is a psychoactive substance in all cases, and in everybody. It does affect the brain and central nervous system. The degree to which it affects a person can vary from person to person, but the mood will be changed. It is lower mood, loss of motivation to study, loss of engagement in school, in work or in study, whatever they're doing. Disturbed sleep. If there's ongoing use of cannabis, sleep is disturbed. Eating patterns are affected, and instances of paranoia. So they're the things kind of to watch out for. This publication is produced by the HSE. It's really, really good. It gives a good step-by-step how to have a conversation with young people in relation to substances and substance use and the risks associated with it. It is available on the HSE website. If you Google "ask about alcohol," you'll find it there, or on the HSE website. If you log on to HSE anywhere, you'll find your way and look for it. It is available there. It is a really, really useful guide. While it is speaking largely in relation to substance use, it's also very useful in the do's and the don'ts and the how to talk about young people, about their mental health. And things that might affect their mental health. So it is a really good publication. So it's certainly one we would recommend that you have a look at. Just in summary, young people will be exposed to these. These are harmful substances, harm to young people's health. Absolutely 100% guarantee that they will come across it. In the 2023 Health Research Board report, they showed that every single county in Ireland last year had people present for treatment in relation to alcohol substance use. So we can say from that 100% that these substances are available in every corner of Ireland, every county in Ireland. Young people will come across them. They are mood-altering chemicals, MACs, or the psychoactive. They affect the brain and central nervous system. So be aware of the signs and symptoms, what to look out for, the paraphernalia, the mood change, and all the rest of it. The recommendation is defer alcohol use by our children until they're at least 18 and even into the 20s if we can, because of the impact it has on the developing brain. For parents, if it's parents we're speaking to on this, parents in particular, we know from the Planet Youth data that you are the most protective factor in influence on your young people. You might not think it as they go through the teen years, but you are. It's there in the Planet Youth data. Over 80% of young people say they get care, warmth and support from parents. So you are the biggest influence, the biggest protective factor.
Okay, and just on that note, we are coming to the end of the presentation. Just to give more information on local support services. So for your young person, if you are facing any of the challenges that were discussed today, we would recommend that you link with your GP services to seek support. But also in addition, we are based in the Dublin North area, so these contacts are in the Dublin North area. But you will be able to signpost it to other services in your area if you're out of the Dublin North area. But just for example, so Fingal Families are based in Malahide and they can give assistance. There is also substance abuse service specific to youth, which is called SASI, and we have the substance use inclusion team through Crosscare. As I said at the beginning, my role is with Prevention Partnership and Family Support as the Child and Family Support Coordinator with TUSLA. We have these roles nationally, and also families can make contact with the CFSN coordinators in the area, and they are happy to signpost you to the relevant services for substances. And also then we have askaboutalalcohol.ie. We have QR codes here for some of the information that we've spoke about today. So the HSE alcohol and the HSE cannabis QR codes there if you wish to avail of. This event has been recorded, so we can share it on. And if anyone has any questions, none have come in at the moment, but if anyone has any questions, you can pop them in the chat, and we might just give a minute for that. But if not, we hope you have got a lot of information from today's session, and thank you for joining. Yeah. Maybe David or Gail, if you want to come with anything else after our talk.
There's no questions coming in, is that?
No questions coming in. No.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thanks a lot. Bye now.